Hey buddy, I like your new card. We got a new mech! It's pretty sick. It's kind of like, almost like Echo from League of Legends. I love the aesthetic of this card. It's so sick. What does it do? 4 intellect, 20 life, mechanologist. Once per turn, as an action, you can pay 2 resources, and then create a hyper driver token with 2 steam counters. Activate this ability only if you've boosted this turn. And it also has the text that hyper drivers you control get crank. New keyword. What does crank do? As it enters the arena, you may remove a steam counter from it, and if you do, you gain an action point. Items inherently do not have go again, so it essentially means that you can play in hyperdriver and then keep playing your turn by removing a steam counter. So you're effectively paying 1 to continue playing. Now, we weirdly got this spoiled right before we got this hero from, I think it's Star City Games or something. They're doing a new buy a box promo type of thing of a cold foil or something. I don't actually know. So we're getting hyperdrivers as a token. Everyone was like, how does this work? It enters with no counters on it because it doesn't say how many counters it enters with on the card. Now we know the answer why, an hour later after we got the hyperdriver spoiled. Now, importantly, the second half of this hero ability works with either hyperdrivers that you create with your hero ability or hyperdrivers that you play from other areas, such as your hand or something like that. What this essentially means is that if you end up with a hyperdriver in hand that you want to play out earlier in the combat chain, it doesn't mean that you have to use it as a chain ender. So let's say, for example, we've got a hyperdriver already in play. We play a 0-cost boost card, activate the hyperdriver already in play, get a resource. Then we play the hyperdriver from hand, using the 1 resource from the first hyperdriver, remove a counter from the new hyperdriver, and then we can play something else, triggering the hyperdriver we just put into play. For example, you can do weird sequencing things like that, where you play mid-turn hyperdrivers, and it doesn't end your turn. The first half of the ability, though, I think is pretty interesting. There's a lot of power in carrying forward resources in Flesh and Blood, which is effectively what this does. It lets you convert 2 resources on your turn now into future 2 resources later. Mechanologist does a great job of using this type of mechanic of carrying forward resources, as a lot of the items do, and it helps you create situations where you're presenting more than your 4 or 5 card hand at your opponent, letting you push over what they theoretically could stop you from doing and what they could block, letting you get through guaranteed damage. And that is something that's really important when you're playing a boost focused class. You're going to be naturally fatiguing over the course of the game, so having ways to help you push over their block value, because if you're just boosting your deck, your opponent's natural response is just going to be just to block. They're just going to throw their hand down and say, you're going to eventually deck out, I'll block. Having ways to scale up the total damage you can present in a turn, really important. Now, the other interesting thing here, too, is the fact that we got crank as a keyword. Might be a little hard to see in the video, but it's bold, it's a keyword. That might mean that we see it on some other cards, and this becomes a mechanic in the set, not just a one-off thing on the hero ability. Could just be a plant for a future set or something. They like to do that in Fab, but something to think about. For example, something I could see, I don't know, an attack action when you play it or when it hits, you can then put a hyperdriver into play from somewhere, either your hand or a token, I don't know. The attack puts a hyperdriver into play, and then this card doesn't have boost, or maybe it does, and you can then use your hero ability to crank the new hyperdriver that you just put into play. That way you can keep going. Now, one thing of note is the interaction that this has with Blessing of Ingenuity. We had a announcement from Joshua Scott, very soon, basically saying that this is no longer going to work this way. The way that this worked was you would activate Blessing, get your 3 hyperdrivers, and then you could use your hero ability on each of them to gain an action point for as many of them as you wanted. But this is all happening in the beginning of turn, and this is not intentional. They are changing that. Here's the tweet here where they talk about that. But basically, the rules are going to be changed where you cannot gain action points outside of the action phase, period. Similarly to how you could not gain action points on your opponent's turn. You can't attack your opponent on their turn. I think this makes sense, but that was going to be a ridiculously powerful interaction if it did work that way. You could just go into the beginning of your turn with 4 action points. Insane. That was going to be a moment of so much for them saying that they wanted to give us access to less action points on average. Voltaire, get that out of here. Blessing, though, 4 action points for everyone. That would have been pretty funny. Now, obviously, this opens up the ability to use Nitro Mechanoid. One rules change also that's going on with this is it was originally ruled before that the tokens that you're creating from this would not work as like materials under it. That is also being changed where now you can use the token hyperdrivers as materials under the Mechanoid and it'll work as it feels like it should. So obviously powerful interaction doing just Nitro Mechanoid things. Everything I said in the Dash database video kind of holds true here. There's a lot of powerful interactions that you can have with Nitro Mechanoid, such as playing a high octane, playing multiple boost cards in a turn, and then swinging your Nitro Mechanoid multiple times in a turn because it is not a once per turn action to attack with it. Or you live in the magical Christmas land where you play 2 high octanes and play 4 boost cards, very possible, and you swing with the Nitro Mechanoid 8 times. That's 47 damage just off the Nitro Mechanoid. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on that, though, just check out my Dash video. I go more in depth on that there. Now, similarly to Database Dash, though, I am a little concerned that there might not be much reason to play this version of Mechanologist over the OG Dash. We're gonna have to wait and see more cards, obviously. But you have to think, is not getting to start the game with an item but having this hero ability instead better? Now, being able to convert your blues into future resources is very powerful, but so is starting the game with a pounder in a racing matchup or an induction chamber in a matchup that you don't want to get fatigued. You also have to consider that there's some cards that you're just losing, that you're just not able to play in the deck because your name is not Dash. Tekla Core and Spark of Genius are insanely powerful cards. Spark of Genius, I like to joke, is the OG Codex. The rate on this card is absolutely insane. The average times that you're using this, you're going to be just grabbing a Tekla Core, which is worth 4. You're getting 4 resources out of it, and then you get a card off the top of your deck. Average card in your deck is probably good. You want to play good cards, so you're probably getting 3 to 4 value off the top of your deck. Very powerful card and also very flexible. Losing this, that's a pretty big deal. So we're gonna have to see what we get for specializations for this hero that Dash doesn't get access to. What are you able to do that Dash doesn't do normally? But I think it's really interesting what they're doing here. It's almost like they're trying to retain the identity of Dash, but then split it up over 2 different heroes. Theoretically, when Dash LLs, we're not gonna have the ability to play that deck anymore. But now instead, you have your dedicated item version of the deck, and then you have a dedicated boost version of the deck. You do lose a bit of that power of the flexibility of I can play multiple strategies into one deck and kind of choose how I want to sideboard, but at least the ability to play that deck is retained. And I really like that. I think that's a pretty elegant way of going about that. And it feels like they're trying to get ahead on things compared to before where what we saw with like Monarch and other things where, you know, Prism and Chain LL, and we just don't have an alternative. There is nowhere else to go to play this hero. There is no alternative. So I like them getting ahead on that. Even if they just don't see play right now, we have the option once they LL. And I like that. It's pretty cool. But what do you guys think about Maxx? Are you guys looking forward to playing Echo in League of Legends? Or my boy Hawk up here? If you guys didn't see their spoiler video, it was really funny. I really enjoyed it. I'm gonna put a link in the description below if you didn't see it. It was very enjoyable. Go check it out. And again, if you want to see my thoughts on Database Dash, go check out the video over here. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you.